Alright guys, welcome back. We're going to talk about primitive type variables today. How to declare and assign a primitive type variable. Last couple videos we talked about how to print strings and characters to the screen. And we've done that for a while. Now we're going to talk about something brand new, and let's start by typing it in the Google search. Primitive type Java. Let's type that in. See what comes up, and we're looking for the docs.oracle, and here it is. Why? Because Oracle owns Java, and this is the official documentation that we're going to be using through this series. Is there other great documentation out there? Absolutely. Alright, we're going to focus on the section that says primitive data types, okay? And there are 8 different types of variables. Primitive type variables, right? There's many different types of variables, but usually the more complex types of variables are made up of primitive type variables, okay? And we're going to start with that. So now, we're going to start with the char, right? Because that stands for character. Since we're talking about characters, we're going to start for char, and we're going to also cover int a little bit in this video. All right, let's get started. Next, we're going to let's declare. So when we declare a variable, we have to name the type first. Okay, so in this case, we're going to call it char. All right, we could have called it int as well. That's another primitive type, but we're going to start with char. All right, it's a character. Next, we separate it by a white space character. I'm going to use the space bar. You can use an enter sign, the enter symbol. You can use a tab, and it'll work. But I'm going to start with the space bar. Okay, so we separate it by our white space character, and then we name our variable. In this case, I'm going to name it var, V-A-R. Okay? What we did was declare a variable. Let me spell that right. All right. Now, this has naming rules. You can't just name this variable whatever you want. There's certain things you can and cannot name it. One of those things is keywords. You can't name it a Java keyword, your variable. Okay? We're going to talk about that later. What you can and cannot do as far as naming. Okay, the last step is we're going to assign it a value. Variable is equal to W, capital W. And we have... Alright. Now, last, let's print this out. Let's see what it says. Okay, now let's run this. Oop, did I spell something wrong? It looks like I did. I mistyped. Alright, it looks good now. And it prints W. Okay, now let's talk about the code. Notice I didn't surround this by quotation marks. By double quotes or single quotes. Why? Because it's an exact reference to a variable. This is how I use this variable W that's stored in memory. Okay? So we have grabbed some memory from our RAM at this statement. Right? So this grabs some memory. Okay, and it grabs 16 bits from our RAM, which is a really small amount. And we get to use that to store a character value, like W, X, Y. We can even store a special character, like this T. Backslash T is a tab, right? It is a single character. And when I highlight this, I can see that there's a tab highlighted right here. Even if I start all the way over here, there's a tab character. Okay? Notice I can't type in a string, because that's not a character value. That's a string. And string is a variable we're going to be covering later. But we can store a single character. Let's look at one we can read. Alright, and that's how we do that. Now, let's talk about the int. INT, it's the same thing. I'm just changing the type from char to int, and we're going to call it 7. Let's go ahead and run this. And it prints out 7. The only difference is it's declared as a different type. Int takes up 32 bits instead of 16 bits, so int takes up twice as much memory as char. So, yeah, there's just a little bit on how much memory is actually taken up when we start declaring types of variables. So that wraps up this video, and I do want to talk about, I want to wrap up with the docs.oracle. Yes, it is the official one. I don't recommend reading this line by line if you're a brand new computer programmer. Okay, I would recommend watching my videos first, and then reading the book or reading this manual, because it's not exactly user friendly to the new users. You might have to have some might have to have a math background before you start reading some of this, but Yeah, but that's what the series is for. Is for the it's not the absolute beginner. Well, it is. I guess it is. But we're gonna get you started. All right, let's talk about more in the next video.